Hi, everyone. Before we begin, I wanted to let everyone know that the podcast will be on a short break after this episode, returning March 5th for two reasons. The first is there will be two wrap-up episodes that I'll need some time to write. The second is I'm getting my wisdom teeth removed soon and will need time to recover. With that out of the way, let's get into today's episode. This is episode 8 of English Voiceover in Asia. I am your host, Yui Haruhara, and today's guest was not originally scheduled. That's right, this is our first guest that reached out to me, and not for the reason you're expecting. After conducting my interview with Sean Pleven and sharing my findings on Twitter, I received a strange DM from a Twitter account made the same day. He claimed to be a man Sean and I talked about during our discussion of Cyborg Kuro-chan, Colin Shevloff, the voice director of said anime dub. That seemed really suspicious. This guy, who had an account that was just made, following making a post about a massive discovery for this niche topic, just happened to reach out to chat. I asked for verification, and sure enough, Colin sent me his LinkedIn. He even went as far as to give me his phone number to get in touch with Sean. I sent it over to Sean, and not long after, learned they were on the phone for a while catching up. That confirmed beyond the shadow of a doubt, he's the real deal. So how did this all happen? How did he find a tweet by little old me about an obscure anime in the West with an even more obscure dub made in Hong Kong? It just randomly came to mind for him. He decided to look on Google the day after I posted the tweet, and he found me, made a Twitter account, and contacted me. Just a wild coincidence. A good portion of today's interview is already on YouTube, but only the Cyborg Kuro-chan info. Today's episode will cover his backstory and career, which isn't on YouTube. If you'd like to hear the section about Cyborg Kuro-chan, you can watch it on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@YuiHaruhara. Unfortunately, Colin only had an hour to talk, so this episode will be rather brief, but is still insightful. Without further delay, here's my interview with Colin Shevloff. All right, so go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Colin. I was, as far as Cyborg Kuro-chan goes, I was the writer and the director and the voice of Dr. Go. Probably some other little voices in there as well, but I just remember Dr. Go.
Yeah, very, very big character in that.
Yeah, I mean, they were all such good characters. It's probably, and I think the reason that I was so excited when I saw that tweet about Kuro-chan was it had been the most fun that we had had in the studio for a really long time, and it was such a series, and it was really close for me as well because it had kind of marked the point where we'd done some things differently, and we had really enjoyed doing them, all of us, but in particular me.
Yeah, it sounded like y'all had a blast.
Yeah, it was always fun in the studio. I mean, I don't know. Do you know very much about how voicing is done or dubbing is done? Okay, so you can be split into single tracks where you can have everybody in the studio together. If you're voicing, right now I work as a producer, and so for the series that I work on, we have actors come in, and usually, particularly in COVID, they're by themselves in the studio doing their lines. For some series, you can have an ensemble cast in a room, and that's really quite a lot of fun. For dubbing, you've got kind of a small desk with pages across it, and everybody kind of knows their lines. The script is marked up in a particular way, so everybody kind of knows their cues and how to kind of move forward across their lines, and everybody is sort of huddled in together. And in particular, some of the studios in Hong Kong were pretty tight quarters, and it was a lot of fun. When you had a really good team of people together, it could be a real blast.
That's awesome. Where are you originally from?
Actually, from Canada. I was born in Vancouver and grew up on Vancouver Island, just outside of Victoria.
And where do you live now?
I actually live now just outside of Vancouver. So yeah, it's it's called the Sunshine Coast, and it's just outside of Vancouver, basically up on the coast. But I left Victoria when I was maybe 17, and I only came back 4 years ago.
Oh wow.
So it's kind of nice being back. But it feels odd to say I grew up here and I live here because actually there's a huge chunk of like what's around me that doesn't feel very familiar, oddly.
Yeah. Why did you move to Hong Kong?
Originally, my parents had moved there when I finished high school. My parents moved away to Hong Kong,
Okay.
and I stayed and started university and ended up traveling and yada yada. And then at some point, I think I was in London. I was pretty broke. I was sort of wondering what I should be doing with myself, and maybe I'll go back to school. Maybe I'll do this. And I thought I'll go visit my parents. I hadn't gone to see them, so I went to Hong Kong just to visit them. And in fact, that's when I met Darren. In fact, I think they had met him beforehand because the restaurant that he was working in was sort of in a town in the outskirts of Hong Kong and sort of the country park sort of area um, where he was working and where they were living.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, and then it was literally I had been an actor, amateur actor and kind of a goofball really, um, for most of my through school essentially, and yeah, when I spoke to him, it was really just to sort of meet someone to kind of have a beer with who was about the same age, kind of thing,
Yeah.
um, and who was sort of familiar, I suppose. And yeah, he said, here's the stuff that he's doing on the side, and they're looking for people, and if you've got experience acting, you should come and try it. And I thought, oh, okay, we'll go do that.
That's awesome. Yeah, Darren had a similar story on how he got in, so that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah, and Rick and Ina, who owned Omni Productions, lived out near that area as well. And I
Hmm.
can't remember if Darren met them actually at that restaurant or somewhere else, but it was somewhere similar, or maybe he met Henry. Anyway, I can't remember how Darren got started, but yeah, it wouldn't be all that different.
Yeah. So you didn't just do voice acting, you did the script writing, correct?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Originally, I started just as when they brought you in, you do audition, and then it was really quite formalized early on. There when I started there wasn't a whole ton of work. It was mostly movies that had been produced in Hong Kong or Thailand or not so much China sometimes, but Japan. And they would do, a movie would take quite a while to do. And as someone new coming in, you'd be like what was called man A or man B
Mhm.
or waiter. You'd just kind of wait around the studio. You'd watch these guys that had been doing this for years, and then you'd be waiting for your waiter to come by and say, here's your tea, sir, sort of thing, and you just do it like that. Um, and eventually, I got more and more voices, and then yeah, had the opportunity to write. And it was really because around that time, this I guess is like 1995, maybe. There were a number of cable television networks that were opening up
Wow.
around Asia, and suddenly they needed a lot of content, and they
Hmm.
needed it in English as one of the tracks. They were also doing it in Bahasa or whatever, depending on where they were doing it. Um, and I guess a it was more cost effective for them to dub the voices than to buy a version that may have previously been done in North America or in Europe or somewhere else. So there was suddenly this just massive volume of work that had to get done, and things at that point changed really quickly, and we had to sort of reorganize ourselves to figure out how to do all the work. And so the team grew massively. Opportunities for script writing came up as part of that, and the rest
Wow.
as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's what I kind of gathered as far as like dubs that were already done in North America. Like you have your Inuyasha and Yu Yu
Mm,
Hakusho. It's just cheaper to redo it than to license it. Because I
yeah.
mean, with Yu Yu Hakusho, they just straight up took the American script
Yeah,
and did a new dub.
yeah. Well, I mean, and that becomes the. I was also thinking about it, or trying to think about it this morning and the other day. There were so many.
Mhm.
There are so many projects, and that it kind of went through stages. So, like the early stage where things really kind of started to blow up, it wasn't just cartoons. We had, and this is before Victor was in Hong Kong, or and this is sort of an earlier version of Omni, really. And it was at a studio called, I think it was called Media House. It eventually was bought out by SDI, and became part of SDI, which is
Yep.
and it was like Japanese game shows. It was like hockey games that had to be called in English that had
Huh.
been done overseas. It was and really bizarre, but quite fun Japanese game shows. There were a lot of live action series, a lot of Japanese live action series, and it would be everything from like Shinkansen, which is it was about life on the train. It was like Love Boat, but on the train. And then One Hotel, which was like Love Boat, but in a hotel. It was that kind of era of storytelling in Japan where it was all kind of fairly soft drama and sort of romantic. And then more on the kids' side, it was like Kuga. Kuga was like a kind of a it's a pretty bad comparison, but sort of a Power Ranger-esque sort of character. Had cool, had a cool motorbike, and would grab his belt and change into kind of his fighting form, rubbery monsters, all that kind of stuff. And then there was a lot of cartoons as well, but it really was like every day would be a really mixed bag of the type of stuff you're doing. Japanese samurai drama with all like super kind of like macho and really, really cool, really stylized to just, Doraemon and all sorts of really fun stuff.
Oh, did you work on Doraemon?
Yeah.
Do tell.
Yeah, we did Doraemon for a while. Yeah, that was in that period, I guess.
Okay, because that's kind of what I'm known for better or worse, is
Okay.
early on in my YouTubing career, I did a video about Doraemon because it's huge in Asia, but it didn't come here until 2014.
Oh, right. Oh, okay.
Yeah, there was a dub made in California.
Yeah, okay.
And it just never really went anywhere. They did 2 seasons and that was it. But there's so many other versions. There was a dub in Singapore. There was a dub in Canada all the way back in like 1986. There's like all this stuff. So do you remember what you exactly worked on as far as Doraemon and what you did? Because this is news to me.
Directing. I remember Gemma Doraemon. I don't know. Honestly, at that time we had 3 or 4 studios running at once. So we had teams in every studio, and we would sort of sort out the day based on myself and Ina would direct. Sometimes Darren would direct. And for some of it, it was kind of you just like self-directed. Like there was a fellow by the name of Kent who was Canadian. He grew up on the East and was a huge hockey fan. And so for the hockey games, there wasn't a script. He'd just call a game. He'd watch it. He'd get to know the players, and then he would just sit there and call a game like the announcer on playback. And so you could leave Kent in the studio with a hockey game, and he would do that. And that was
awesome.
That was great. So you had a lot of different studios going on, a lot of different projects at once, and you'd be jumping back and forth because you'd be characters in something. I might be directing something and also character in that, and also character in something that was happening in the other studio. And so it was this kind of, it was a total circus in terms of like getting stuff done, but it was super fun.
That honestly, it sounds like it's like frustrating from the standpoint of the time crunch, but also a lot of fun because you get to do all this crazy stuff.
Oh yeah. And we had pages being faxed in, like, sometimes you'd stop and you'd just be waiting, and the writers would be, at their homes kind of madly trying to sort out and lip sync pages, and they would be faxing them through, and like, you'd get like another 5 pages or 10 pages, and then the whole team would go into the studio, and there were a lot of people back then. Wow. And they're just this group of people in this huge sort of like living room type area, just kind of hanging out, entertaining each other. And they're all really funny. They're all good actors. A lot of them were just funny people generally. Yeah. And so it was madness, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think that's what everyone from Hong Kong has said. It's like crazy, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then with Doraemon, you said someone named Gemma?
Yeah, Gemma.
What's the last name?
What was Gemma's last name? Gemma was from Scotland.
Scotland.
Oh, what was Gemma's
That's
last name?
half the fun of doing this podcast. Is like it's not just people that
Yeah.
lived in Asia or like people that were born in Asia. It's people from all over the place.
Yeah. I don't know what became of Gemma, actually. I feel like she went back to the UK at some point, but I really lost track of her. She stopped working with it. Like there were people that were with the company and then, weren't with the company in later phases. And so Gemma was there for that period.
And guess what do you do in your free time?
Oh, I've got a family,
I get that one a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of time is spent with that, the soccer games and the rest of it. I recently bought a sailboat, so that takes up some of my
Yeah,
time.
I remember you
Um,
mentioning that.
yeah, there's a lot of foraging out here. So right now it's chanterelles are out. So, I've got a dog and there's some forest walks. There's avoid bears and look for mushrooms that are edible.
Wow, that sounds exciting. So as for questions, I mean, it sounds like you have an excellent memory, which is awesome. So I was gonna
Yeah, I
say,
mean, I don't know how much I have for the particular series, but for some of it I do for sure.
yeah, I totally get it if you don't remember certain things, because I know it was 2 decades ago, just about. So
Yeah.
I think some people I talk to them and they expect me to expect them to remember everything, and I'm just like, no, it's forever ago. Like I don't know. Do you know Candace Moore?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I talk to her time to time. She's still in
Okay.
Hong Kong.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel bad I bug her so much, but yeah, it's just like, do you remember working on that? She's like, I remember I was in it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I remember when did we audition Candace? Trying to remember what period. I think she came in kind of she came in the second period. So it was past all that sort of initial um setup of the cable stations. And then I went away. I left Hong Kong and I went back to university. I was gone for maybe 4 or 5 years in Australia. And
oh.
then when I came back, I'd studied management information systems and systems analysis and design and thought I should probably go and work in sort of a serious industry and be a grown-up sort of thing. And so I went and got my degree and it was really enjoyable. And then I got back and I was filling in applications. I think I had an offer for something at IBM in South Ireland, but I kept getting like halfway through their questionnaire, and then sort of putting the pen down kind of thing. And I realized at that point, like I didn't really want to do this. I'd actually had a lot of fun doing all the dubbing and everything that we had done before, and so I just put it down and returned back to doing that. And at that point, I had been sort of in it a little bit over the 4 years because I do some work overseas where I could, mostly script writing, only script writing really,
Hmm.
but not very much. And then when I would come back to Hong Kong at times to visit my parents, I'd usually go in the studio and there'd be a movie or something to work on. I think that's when we did some of the Godzilla movies. Yeah, and then there was this sort of second sort of growth at that point. So SDI was really growing then. I don't think Ayuno was around then. There was another studio called Media Land, but it was really much more formalized in terms of the work, and a lot more work came out of the studios themselves as opposed to directly via Omni. And it was, I guess that was also around where DVDs were becoming a thing or widely adopted, I guess. And a lot of material was being remastered because the audio tracks weren't great. They needed a slightly different, I don't know if they needed a different format, but it made sense. And I guess it was the way they were carving out the licenses. So I think we had a deal with, it was like Vanguard or something like that. It was a UK distributor, and they were redoing like all the Jackie Chan movies and that kind of stuff.
That's really
Um,
cool.
and yeah, and so we got to go back and redo that. But that was, I think that's when Candace was there, was in that sort of second tranche of stuff. And there was a lot of Disney and Nickelodeon, and there were a couple other channels around Asia that were really, and Animax. That's when Animax was. That's right. That was the Animax period. So it was really heavy on cartoons then because Animax was setting up and they needed a lot of content. And so, yeah, that's that sort of second period for Omni that was really quite busy.
Wow. Yeah, that is amazing. Now to sidetrack a little bit, you mentioned Medilon. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
So I mentioned what?
Medilon,
Oh, okay,
Mediland.
sure, yeah. The studio?
Yeah, because from what I understand, in more recent times, they would commission dubs from other studios like Red Angel Media and SDI Media, and they would give the product to Animax to air on TV.
Yeah, that's right. So
Okay, that's what I thought.
right. So really, this was all. I guess Animax was the main studio that SDI and Medialand were supplying material for, and Torrance was his name, who owned or Torrance, who owned Medialand. Really nice guy.
There's
Yeah.
so much unknown territory as far as documenting Hong Kong English dubs. And I
Mm.
know it's a little bit of confusion. And that's part of my goal as far as making content is clearing up the confusion and giving a very clear picture as to what happens back then and how things worked. And I think I have
Yeah.
a pretty clear picture now that I know Medialon did receive the material from other studios and gave those materials to Animax. Medialon doesn't exist anymore. As far as
Oh,
I
does
know,
it not?
as far
Oh,
as
really?
I'm aware from what I did my research, as far as I know,
Yeah.
they folded.
Okay.
But SDI is still around. They're still doing stuff.
Yeah.
Red Angel Media is still doing stuff.
Yeah.
Russell Waite works there. No, this has already been very, very interesting and very insightful.
Yeah.
How much time do you have? Because you changed the time period to an hour. I
Yeah,
block
I
off
did.
two.
I figure I've really got another half an hour, and then I might have to. I have to
Yeah.
go and
If we
actually
if
talk.
we have to do a part two, that's fine. I'm pretty open. But I know I usually block off 2 hours, and the reason for that, I don't really take the 2 hours. I just block it off just in case we need it. But that's
Yeah.
totally fine if you're on a time crunch. I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into the fan questions. Oh, before that, two more questions from me.
Hmm.
Did you work on Anpanman, little bread
This is the
superhero?
bread thing, right?
Yeah.
Ah, yeah, but I can't, what did we do on it? I can't remember. Like sometimes you watch things and sometimes you work on things, and so
All
because
right.
it was so long ago, but
Yeah.
I seem to remember on Pond Man in SDI
Yeah.
early on, and that was in that first set. I think in like the kind of mid '90s. I think it was that studio because we didn't. I don't think
Oh.
we went back to that studio. Oh, we did go back to that studio. Yes, no, they kind of renovated the inside. When was that? Yeah, I think we did actually. I think we worked
Okay.
on that, and I can't remember what I did on it.
Okay. Because there was a dub in 2009 that had Candace as Anpanman himself, and
Oh, okay, yeah,
yeah,
that would be
that's way after that. But
yeah.
that's really interesting because there is a dub very early on that we know nothing about, and that might be it.
Mm,
So
yeah,
might be
maybe, yeah.
worth circling back on and researching. But last question from me is: did you work on? It's called Lamu the Invader Girl. Was that you?
I don't think so. It doesn't ring a
Yeah,
bell.
Urusei Yatsura is the Japanese name.
What was it?
Urusei Yatsura. It's Lamu the Invader Girl was what it was called on Animax. It was 2004, I want to say.
Okay, I could ask. So my wife, I met my wife in the studio. She was one of the voice
Oh,
actresses.
who's your wife?
Antonia,
Oh,
Antonia Perry.
I recognize the name.
She might know. I could ask her.
Okay.
What was it called again? Sorry, yeah,
Here I'll type it in the chat.
yeah.
Um,
So I'll type. But you can ask me another question if you want.
yeah. So moving on to the fan questions because we're at the half-hour
Okay.
point. This portion of the interview is the Cyborg Kuro-chan questions. I am skipping ahead to our wrap-up questions. Reminder, if you want to check out the Cyborg Kuro-chan stuff, check it out on YouTube. If you had the chance to be on any project at all, what would you choose?
As a voice actor, you mean, or?
Oh, voice actor, script writer.
Oh, yeah. Let you mean something going forward, something that's being produced now, or
Yeah.
I don't know, actually. Trans something where we were basically just throwing away the script and writing ourselves. And I was saying we were working on. It was a comedy from one of these really old films that were done in Asia. That was so much fun, and that kind of led to working on. I worked on like a couple of movies then, and we really wanted to make a B movie. I think I would still really like to just like I know there's some really good high-end movies and there's great character and action and stuff out there that would be fun to be a part of. But I actually would really like to just go back and make a really fun, goofy B movie. And I don't know what it would be. I remember we'd written a couple of scripts. We had a bunch of different things that we were looking at trying to figure out how to get funded, but it was pretty early on in kind of understanding how to produce or anything, and most of it didn't go anywhere.
Huh. And my final thing is anything you want to say to the Cyborg Kuro-chan fan base?
No, I mean, I'm so happy that there are people out there who are enjoying it. I mean, it really had been certainly the start of, but probably the most fun we had had working on a series for me, for writing and being in the studio. But I think for the whole team in the studio, it was quite a good laugh. And so it's nice to know. And often these things go off into the ether, and you don't really know, what they're used for. Particularly at that time, less so with Animax, but early on with some of the cable stations, like I have no idea where any of those projects went. And so I'm really, yeah, it's nice to know there's someone out there who likes it as well, because it was so much fun. So yeah, I'm super happy that that's what that you like it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all of this info. We will definitely stay in touch.
Yeah, she actually responded here. She said she doesn't think she was on the Lamb of the Invader Girl. She remembers Sakura, Cardcaptor, I guess, Hagamaru, something called Clamp School, and then Host Club.
Was she in Doraemon at all?
No, I don't think we had. I feel like there was like 2 stabs at Doraemon. I feel like that we did some early on, and then we did some later.
Yeah, we'll catch back up on another platform, but it's you got to go.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. You enjoy your sailboat.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm going to paint a house first. Actually, I've told a friend I'd help them paint, so that's why.
Awesome.
Go,
all right.
11.
You have a great Saturday. Great
yeah, nice meeting you. Yeah. This was fun.
Yeah.
So what's the so you're putting together a podcast, is that right?
Yeah, and I also run a YouTube channel, and I'm doing a video eventually on Kuro-chan. It's been an unbelievably popular request. So I'm glad I finally have leads, and I finally have a mountain of info.
Right, okay. Oh, good. Yeah, well, good luck. Good luck.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Nice talking to you.
Thank you to Colin for taking the time to do this interview, and thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, please be sure to subscribe via your favorite podcast app to know first when an episode is posted. If you want to hear more info about English dubs, check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@yuiharuhara. If you're an actor that has worked in Asia and would like to be a guest on the podcast, please send an email to yuiharuhara@gmail.com. If you're a listener and would like to know when I have upcoming guests, please follow me on Twitter @yuiharuhara or stay tuned to my YouTube community tab. From there, you'll be able to ask guests questions that may be featured in their interview. Also, if you'd like to support me further, consider joining my Patreon, patreon.com/yuiharuhara. Until next time, take care.